was a little over a year ago today that I signed up for the GranGuanche gravel event. If you've done the same and not sure what to expect, or thinking about riding it in the future, then this video is for you. And for everyone else watching, let me tell you a little bit about the GranGuanche audax gravel experience. GranGuanche gravel takes place in the Canary Islands. The Canary Islands are a small group of islands located just off the west coast of Morocco. There are 7 main islands in the Canaries. These are Tenerife, Gran Canaria, Lanzarote, Fuerteventura, La Palma, La Gomera and El Hierro. The GranGuanche route sees you riding across 5 out of 7 of these islands, from Lanzarote in the far northeasternmost part of the Canaries, riding islands and taking ferries between Fuerteventura, Gran Canaria, Tenerife to the furthest point west, the quiet, beautiful island of El Hierro. The adventure begins in complete darkness on the first island of Lanzarote, with riders starting their journey at sea level and then quickly rising up to the highest points on the island, including a steep gravel path near the start. You will then soon be greeted by strong winds at the top. Don't expect to see much of Lanzarote, as your first goal is to reach the port a couple hours after first light. In 2024, when I rode the GranGuanche, the organisers threw in a curveball towards the end of the ride across Lanzarote, a hike-a-bike section up a hill not far from the ferry that would take you on to Fuerteventura. This hike-a-bike section gave a great insight, a hint, a wake-up call as to what would lie ahead of you. Finally, I would reach the ferry crossing some 2 or 3 hours later than hoped. So when you think you've nearly conquered Lanzarote, heed these words: don't celebrate too soon. Once you've reached the port of Playa Blanca, and before you take the ferry, do take the time, and hopefully you'll have plenty of it, to have something to eat and top up on food and drinks. This will save you some time having to find somewhere in the port of Coros on Fuerteventura. Now, the ferries do have food and drink on board, but I'm not able to give you any first-hand experience of what it was like in terms of what they may have on offer. Crisps and soft drinks spring to mind. Whatever you do, you will quickly find out as you ride across Fuerteventura that points for resupply are few and far between. Fuerteventura itself is a sandy island with long stretches of nothing but desert, rocks, ocean views and mountains off in the distance. You will wind your way on soft trails surrounded by nothing but great views. Oh, but I mustn't forget to mention the long section of waterboard gravel at the very beginning. That will keep you swearing for hours to come. So anyway, the route across Fuerteventura sends you up to the highest mountain on the island, so be ready for that. And as you descend off towards the port and the next ferry, you will come across long stretches of rock gardens, a stop-start affair of lifting your bike up, pedalling for 50 metres before having to repeat over and over again. I found this part of the island to be very tedious, frustrating, slow and disappointing. And as darkness grew, it was with much relief that I and my newly found friend James reached the oasis of a Burger King at 2 AM or whatever time it was. I entered GranGuanche with the mindset of, oh, this looks like a great holiday, which yes it was, but in retrospect I did underestimate how hard this was going to be, and so for a time I questioned why I even entered at all. Anyway, back on Fuerteventura, you will eventually at some point catch a ferry across to Gran Canaria, and I hope for you that the ocean waves are kinder than they were for me, as it's not a pleasant experience thrown up on the ferry. I can't wait to get to a petrol station, get some chewy gum, having to refuel, rehydrate, ride your bike while it's really stopping for long. Despite all that, the most memorable island of GranGuanche for me was Gran Canaria. The contrast in the landscape was obvious. You start off in the busy roads out of the city, you turn a corner and are suddenly faced with this off-road section, the Barranco de Guangada. As you pass through, here you enjoy looking up at both sides of city life well above you.
How did you feel about the ferry? Did you have fun on the ferry?
Loads of fun.
How many bags did you fill?
Nearly 2.
Oh, you get a prize for that.
Certainly one of the highlights of passing through Gran Canaria, of which there are plenty still yet to see and experience. Once back on tarmac, there will be some, yes, busy and not so busy town roads as you head ever upwards gaining altitude. Eventually, after a final resupply, you will reach the bottom of a mountain pass. This section of the route will take you up to the very top of Pico de la Neves, but it will take you much longer to reach than you think. If you didn't stop up in the nearby town, it may be wise to visit the bar and restaurant you will find carved into the rockside, whose name I will not try and pronounce. It will be your last meal for quite some time. After reaching the top of Pico de Neves, it's a spectacular roller coaster of a ride down off the other side. But once again, this will take you a very long time, especially if you're not used to riding alongside sheer cliff drops. One bad corner and you're toast. On a lighter note, as you descend and look across the Atlantic, you will see the ferry heading out to the next island, Tenerife. In fact, you'll probably see it multiple times as you descend carefully off this rock. God knows what it would be like after dark. The next island up in GranGuanche gravel is Tenerife. Just like Gran Canaria, it took me 2 legs to cross this island. I wild camped with 2 other riders up near the very top of Mount Tidy. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Before you perhaps ascend the most well-known climb in the Canaries, you must leave first the bustling city of Santa Cruz and head north through the tropical windy hills of Parque Royal. This part of the island is very green and lush. As you turn west out of the park, you will soon be rewarded with a magnificent woodland descent that breaks back onto a twisty tarmac road downwards towards San Cristobal. On my adventure, this was the last significant resupply until Villa Flora, which is well beyond Mount Tidy. So it's essential we have a good meal here and resupply for the next 12 hours or more, especially if you're planning to camp in the national park overnight as we did. The climb up towards Mount Tidy is a mix of crunchy woodland trails eventually turn into tarmac. On a hot day, you'll be glad to be hiding under the canopy of trees, which will be all around you on much of the ascent. If you're not racing but here for the adventure as I was, when you do finally reach the summit, you definitely want to stop for a moment to take it all in and enjoy the views. It's time to take some photos and look back on what you achieved. Leaving Mount Tidy behind, you can relax a little as you descend. You've earned it. The next 32 kilometers or 20 miles is pure bliss as you descend on gold gravel all the way off the mountain towards Villa Flora, where you'll feel a little disappointed by richer tarmac. Wait, I forgot about this bit. That's crazy. Whatever time of day you do reach Villa Flora, look forward to a 40 kilometre, 25 mile descent all the way down to sea level. Now on to the final island of the GranGuanche. Just to explain the backstory of the edition of the race I was at, there was only one single ferry crossing each day onto El Hierro, which made the section of the race particularly awkward. And that ferry crossing brought you onto the island fairly late into the evening. So in my edition of GranGuanche, it meant that you had no choice but to ride the island under the cover of darkness, and meant having to ride all the way around the island through the night well into the following day in order to get back to the ferry in time. If you missed the ferry, then that was it. You'd be faced with being stuck on El Hierro for another day, having to pay for food and accommodation. Back on Tenerife, I'd been riding much of the time alongside James, the first leg of the island. And then in the morning climb up to Mount Tidy, I was joined by Melanie and Sarah. The 5 of us ascended to the very top and enjoyed the gravel track that led us down to Villa Flora, and eventually regrouped again at the ferry. As a small group, we had talked about the logistics of El Hierro, and during the ferry crossing we decided that we had already enjoyed ourselves so much already, we would instead cycle the small way to the end point and hand in our GPS trackers and collect our belongings. It had been an amazing experience and difficult, of course. For me personally, I thought the cycling in complete darkness around the final island was not something I signed up for. Of course, I had to think about what if I missed the ferry the next day, and how that would have impacted on the rest of my holiday in the Canary Islands. So the five of us, myself, James, Norman, Melanie and Sarah, we ended up camping here at this kids playground overnight, right on the beach. And on the following day, instead of an epic adventure around the whole island, instead we went for a relaxing, no pressure, no distance ride along the coastline of El Hierro. Some good news about El Hierro: if you're entering in 2025, apparently there will now be 3 crossings per day on this island, which will give you a much better opportunity to explore and finish the island. To wrap things up, GranGuanche is a race for the ferry more than anything else, but for everyone who takes part, it is an amazing bikepacking adventure that will leave a long-lasting impression on you. Thanks for watching.
Woohoo! Yes! Woo! Da-da! Da-da-da-da-da!